welcome to another season of Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe meet to empower you to succeed. This program is brought to you by Right Career Fit. Listen and learn, and remember to have that very important career conversation with a career professional.
Find something you care about and then find some way to exercise that passion muscle of yours every day in your life. Virtually across Canada, where there are mandated career courses, almost always it's one of the lowest ranked, lowest rated courses in terms of utility by students. And it's simply because it's taught wrong and taught poorly. Be on the lookout for talent and be prepared to help the other person understand and respect the talent you see in them.
Thank you for joining me in Hoda's Career Info, your career program where guests from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. I am Hoda, your host. I look forward to another season of career chats with international professionals who will inspire you to take your journey to the next level. Today is Dr. Kris Magnusson. Dr. Magnusson is the Senior Advisor to the VP Academic and is responsible for preparing and implementing the business case for SFU's proposed new School of Medicine. Concurrently, he is serving as the Associate VP Academic Teaching and Learning. During his time as Dean, he also served 2 terms as the Chair of the Association of BC Deans of Education, was co-chair of the BC Advisory Group on Provincial Assessment, led the development of the ACDE Accord on Internationalization in Education, and was co-chair of the SFU Aboriginal Reconciliation Council. Kris's academic work is in the area of counseling psychology and career development. He was the recipient of the Province of Alberta Career Development Award of Excellence and the 2006 recipient of the Stu Conger Award for Leadership in Career Development. Kris is also a co-founder of the Canadian Research Working Group for Evidence-Based Practice. Prior to joining SFU, Kris was a junior high school teacher, a college counselor, and a faculty member in counseling psychology at the Universities of Calgary and Lethbridge. I want to thank you for joining me and Dr. Kris Magnusson. Stay tuned as Dr. Magnusson introduces us to the 5 Ps, shares his career journey, and reflects on what makes a great mentor. Welcome, Dr. Kris Magnusson, to Hoda's Career Info. I appreciate your time today, and I'm very excited that you have agreed to be a part of this program.
Thanks, Hoda. I'm looking forward to it.
Dr. Kris, I always like to challenge my guests with the first question by asking them to choose what I like to call career term that defines your work that you do and all the services that you offer, and then define it from your perspective, not the dictionary, or if I were to do Google search perspective. For young people, I call it career hashtag because
hashtag, yeah.
Because now they're all about hashtags.
Yeah. Boy, to bring it into a hashtag that would define the work, I really don't think I can do that. There's too many that find expression in the work over the last 40 years. So early in my work, I would say the hashtag would be something closer to reinventing process. And when I started in this field, and it's still somewhat true today, there was such a heavy emphasis on job finding as the focus of career development. And there was also a heavy focus on the use of logic and information. As you know, if you're having a career difficulty, then all we got to do is open up your head and pour more information in. And with all that wonderful information, you're well on your way. A lot of career process training reflected the business of self-assessed on information like interests and aptitudes, and then information about the world of work, and then doing the matching. So the good old Frank Parsons 1909 on choosing a vocation dominated the field for the first 70, 80 years. And that's still kind of a legacy that people think of. And so my first work was to say, we have to bring the person way more into this process. The person is so much more than a collection of interest profiles, aptitudes, and measured occupational standards within a field. And so I developed something I called the 5 processes of career planning. And just really, really emphasizing that if we want to help another individual, we need to focus on the process of engagement, the process of how we bring them into this wonderful world. Then we can focus on the process of exploring. But that means exploring deeply into self and into community and into relations, because one's place in the world is defined by so much more than an occupational choice, which may or may not even be available to them. So there are these 5 processes that I think we need to engage in. And each person may require different emphasis on different one of those processes, but all 5 have to be in there. It's, engage, explore, decision-making and planning, preparation, and implementation. So those are the 5 processes. So they iterate and they cycle back and forth. In a way, it was trying to professionalize and deepen the interaction between the helper and the helpee, and to recognize that it's so much more than a cognitive process. So that was my work. That was kind of my entry into the field, was doing that kind of work. And I first started doing it as a counselor in a community college, where none of the stuff I'd been trained in and how to do career work actually worked with any of the humans I dealt with. And so we needed something different. So that was kind of my entry, as it were, into the field. Later, the hashtag would probably be the 5 Ps. And that one hashtags rather nicely. And it was during a graduate course where I was teaching these 5 processes, and a student said, we just spent maybe 3 weeks going through each of these in detail. And she said, can you summarize the whole set of processes? And I'm going, wow, that's pretty complex to try to summarize. And so I said, if we want to distill the career helping process down, we need to start by finding a source in the, let's call it the client that we're working with. We need to find a source of pride, something that they just, they take a great sense of fulfillment out of. And these sources of pride are important. Everybody has a pride story. Even if it's deeply buried, even if it's disputed by the person, they've got one. And so we need to spend some time uncovering that story, because if we do, underneath the pride is the reason for the pride, and that's their passion. That's what they find meaning in. So you're proud of something because it holds a certain value for you. And if we want to help people make choices about the future, we need to build on not the specific things they've done in the past, but the reasons for the things that gave them a sense of satisfaction. Because if we can identify those core values and meaning statements, the quest becomes one to find a way to express that in one's new environment. And so the third P is to take that passion and harness it, find a purpose for it. And the purpose gives us a sense of direction, it gives us a sense of energy. But if all we have is this stated purpose, it's like a New Year's resolution, which fades fairly quickly for most people because we don't take serious action on it. So the fourth P is to act on the purpose, and that's performance. Do something about it. And the best career advice you can ever receive is find something you care about and then find some way to exercise that passion muscle of yours every day in your life. And opportunities will open up to you that you never dreamed of. Because you're engaging in what you care about, you're more likely to see things, you're more likely to interact with other people who share some of those passions that you have. And then the fifth P is after you've acted on your passion, is that you develop a sense of grace and dignity or poise in what you do.
Wow.
And every time you develop poise at something, you've got a new pride story. As soon as you have that sense of grace and dignity about something, that's something else that you've done that you're proud of, and the cycle repeats. So that's the 5 Ps was kind of the next area of work that probably became more well-known for that, this little throwaway comment in a class than most anything else. Third phase, I guess, would be reflected in the fact that career services were never really valued for what they could do. Most of the time, funding was provided simply, governments or agencies provided funding primarily as a bridge to take unemployed people and get them into employment. And they could care less about all the other things that were part of the broader career pattern. And so I worked with another colleague of mine, Brian Hebert, and we started working on how might we document the impact of career services. And so there was a body of work that came out for several years where we were developing different kinds of methodologies to actually document what happens when you do career development right, instead of doing it as a decision-making, job-finding only piece of it. So those are kind of the major phases, I would suppose. And the current project that I'm doing, which I had to step away from because of other commitments around building a medical school here at SFU. But the research project is connecting career development and mental health for youth. So, and that rose out of the impact work. We know that when you do career development well, it has impacts on how people feel about themselves, on their sense of confidence, on their sense of connection to their immediate community, and their sense of connection to a future possibility. And all of those career outcomes are listed as determinants of mental health. So what if we connect those? And what if we intentionally show particularly teachers how to embed simple career constructs into what they teach so that it has these impacts that positively influence mental health for young people? As we know, the mental health challenges in schools today are enormous, and it's a very hot topic. And our suggestion is instead of only investing tons of resources in remedial or emergency work to help people in mental health crisis, what if we built stronger foundations of mental health and well-being and reduce the need for the crisis care? You still need it, but you won't need it nearly as much. And overall, you should see a rise in the sense of students' own agency towards their future, which is a huge impact or huge component of mental health. So I guess there is one more hashtag that I would put out there that is a thread throughout all of the work I've ever done, and that is based on career often getting the short stick when it comes to thinking about how training should happen. It's in counseling center and counseling training. It's kind of what you do if you can't do real counseling. You know, there's these kinds of in schools, it's thought of as just this afterthought. Even when they develop entire curricula, they almost never, I've never seen a provincial system that designs a career curriculum and then actually teaches teachers how to teach it. They just assume, and so then people give what they know, which is old age kinds of thinking. And so what I want to do is find ways to embed powerful constructs of career into places that don't expect it. So embedded into high school curriculum, embedded into organizational development. I did a lot of work using career development in organizational settings, treating the organization as a client and using career development principles to improve productivity and profitability and all those kinds of things. So the last hashtag, I think, would be career development as a guerrilla activity.
You're going to need to elaborate on that.
Well, there are so many artificial barriers and misunderstandings about career that we have to sneak it in where people don't expect it. And once we've snuck it in, it's like the guerrilla activity is, you know, you're sniping from the bushes, you're doing the surprise attacks that you don't really see that it's out there, you're not expecting it. But once they see it, they see the power of it. And so if we can sneak these career principles in, as a quick example, I embed the 5 Ps in virtually every class I teach at a university. And I encourage people at the front end of a class to find something they could connect with in all this material. Maybe even if this is a required class for you, find something that you can connect with that kind of latches on to something you care about. And then see what you can do to make a difference in your own learning with this thing that you care about within this class that we're teaching. So I'm basically doing pride, passion, purpose, performance, and voice. And then I tell them afterwards, this is what we're doing, and they get it, they start to think differently about how they approach their next set of engagements.
Your hashtag summarized and really nitpicked every, I think, issue within the career development field, and why I feel that we're moving very slowly towards making it an important topic in the school system. Your idea for a guerrilla is amazing. I don't know, because to me it's always, let's design a curriculum and enforce it, or take a tool but make sure we follow up on it. But it's difficult to do it in a regular classroom when there are so many other important topics to talk about.
And so one thing that we came up with based on those 5 Ps is a very quick how to have 5 P conversations with students. And so you can teach teachers how to have those conversations in about an hour. And it's kind of interesting. I put a book out. This background is the background to the book, Harnessing Perspective and Emotion in Career Practice. And it actually got picked up in Australia. And so I was invited to do some keynote talks in Australia, largely aimed at teachers and largely aimed at helping the everyday practicing teacher understand how they could use these very, very simple principles to make a difference in the lives of the students that they teach, how to have these 5 P conversations. And there's some simple questions that you can asked to focus people's attention. It doesn't take a ton of time. It can happen over time. So I started as a classroom teacher. I know what that's all about. I know how pressured it is and how little time you have to deal with the curriculum. And so I get all of that. But the kinds of conversations we're talking about can be microbursts. They can be 1 and 2 minute observations that over time add up and build up and are really quite transformative.
But you talked about the book and about the 5 Ps. And so is
Right.
this idea of 5 Ps practiced anywhere in British Columbia that we feel teachers are willing to pick it up and incorporate it into their teaching? Or is this like part of the guerrilla thing that we need to figure out a way to do it?
Still needs to be part of the guerrilla tactics of bringing it in. I bring it in places that I touch. It was part like the 5 processes. The 5 Ps were essentially the 5 processes, right?
Right.
And that 5 process model was the foundation for a couple of career development training programs, certificate programs that existed for a number of years. I was in Alberta for about 30 years before I came to BC, and so you see a lot of it there. It was then the Career Development Institute, the Center for Career Development Innovation, taught it in their programs. It found expression in some of the teaching out at Conestoga. It was part of the curriculum for a continuing education program at the University of Calgary. So it's had some airtime, but trying to get it into teaching practice is a little trickier. Working with some colleagues, we developed a draft micro-credential. We actually have a meeting, I think in 2 days, to talk about, now that we've developed it, how can we get it into practice? And the micro-credential is essentially, well, there's 3 of them. The first one is essentially, you could have a subtitle of what every K-12 teacher needs to know about career development and how to use it. And it's about a 10 to 12 hour piece of work. Then the second micro-credential we translated would be how to positively influence well-being of your students through career development interventions within your classroom. So again, we're not talking about big curricula. We're just talking about things that every teacher can do in their day-to-day interactions with their students to make a difference. So there's these 2 micro-credentials. We've had preliminary discussions with some school districts who are interested in perhaps bringing them in as part of their professional development. We've had some conversations with professional associations who are looking at maybe bringing it in as something that their members could pick up. And I'll be following up with the BC Ministry of Education around getting it on an approved list of Pro-D for teachers in the province. So we're trying that structural method to get that in. We also set it up in such a way that if you took all 3 micro-credentials, you could fuse them together and create the equivalent of a 3-credit university class. So any university that wanted to pick it up and offer it within curriculum would be able to do so. And they'd have the whole design just sitting in front of them, and it would be a relatively straightforward process to do. So we're trying to make it easy to adopt.
That's very, very, very exciting news for me to hear, because I really, this is my push, is make it part of the teaching certification or degree, and then hopefully teachers can use it in their practices. Because like you said, it's very hard to introduce a career course in schools, just for students to take that as part of the curriculum.
We did have some, I spent some time working with our ministry, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. There was a massive curriculum overhaul in British Columbia for the whole K-12 curriculum. And one of the pieces that got over, and the goal was to make more of a 21st century learning emphasis in the curriculum across all subject areas, focusing on big ideas and main themes and less on rote memory of facts and knowledge. And as part of that overhaul, they redid the career curriculum for the required career courses. And I was invited to a meeting where the people who were revising the career course kind of wanted to show me the work they've been doing. So I sat down with them, I looked at it, and I said, well, you know, that's really, really good stuff. But have you ever thought of this? And started expanding on some of these ideas. To their credit, the chair of the committee looked around the room afterwards and set her pen down and says, well, we're starting over. And they did. They rebuilt. And so the new BC career curriculum does have many of the modern, what I call the modern, they're pretty old now, but they're still modern to some folks, ways of thinking about career and helping kids in schools navigate that. The piece that we're really missing now is structured form support to train the people who'll be teaching that course so that they don't just revert back to test them and tell them matching, choose an occupation kinds of strategies. Because in the absence of professional development for the teachers, that's what people fall back on because that's what they think it is. So it doesn't matter how wonderfully designed the curriculum is, if the people teaching it don't get it, then they'll just revert back to the old way. So the next challenge, I think, is convincing school districts and the Ministry of Education to support professional development for everybody who's assigned to teach the high school career course.
Totally agree with you on that. In Alberta, I've seen teachers who are specialized in geography, history, having to work the career development portion of courses. And they do it, like you said, from their own experience. That's what they teach it, but they haven't really been exposed to the theories of career development.
Yeah, and the Alberta is a great example because they had one of the most innovative career curriculums. Again, it was based on sound principles of career and life management. But if you look at who ended up teaching, they called it COM 20. It was a required course. It was one of the first times a required career course was in a K-12 curriculum. You couldn't graduate without it. But then it would be, well, who's got a spare Wednesday afternoon? And, oh, well, the phys ed teacher gets along well with kids, so let's get the phys ed teacher to teach the career course. Not picking on phys ed teachers, but they would come in and they weren't interested in it. They didn't know anything about it. And because of that, the kids weren't interested in it. And virtually across Canada, where there are mandated career courses, almost always, it's one of the lowest rated courses in terms of utility by students. And it's simply because it's taught wrong and taught poorly.
And I'm glad you mentioned COM. It was kind of one of the reasons that as my kids were going through it, that I got involved into the career development field. And I was like, somebody's going to do something about it.
Yeah. So again, it wasn't the design itself that was so bad. It was how it was implemented. No, there's lots of things we do different in COM now, but there's a systemic structural problem around valuing the knowledge base that goes into this. So you wouldn't, if you had a choice as a school principal, you wouldn't assign somebody to teach French who has no French language skills whatsoever. No, it happens from time to time, but it's not what you want to do. But that's what happens almost all the time in the career field. And so you get people who have no background and often little interest. And then it's even hard for those, I mean, there's a career education society, you got a bunch of wonderful, wonderful people trying to do things right, but they're not getting supported in that work. And so it's hard for them, even if you are passionate about it, it's hard to keep at it. So we've got some systemic challenges that we need to work on.
And such an important topic that I think I can ask you questions and talk to you about forever. But I do want to move to the next question, which I think usually helps the audience get to know you, Dr. Kris, is a little bit about your story and how you got into the career development field.
My journey would be pretty good examples of of some of the principles of career development that don't get much attention, but are well known if you actually study theories of career development. So things like serendipity, randomness, and then the accidental alignment of passion, capacity, and opportunity. And those three things, different models of career helping often emphasize one or the other, but all three of them are important, right? So how I actually got into this, I needed a senior elective in my 4th year of university to be able to graduate with my Bachelor of Education degree. And I looked at the electives that were available. I also needed one that was on a Thursday afternoon because I liked, after classes were done at the university I went to, they had Thursday was pub night. And so I chose a course that happened to fit my schedule and that allowed me to go to pub night. And that course was an introduction to vocational guidance. And the professor, I still remember him clearly, Dr. Ron Hendricks, and he was teaching this this kind of now I pejoratively call it testamentellum, like how to do vocational assessments and interpret vocational assessments. So aptitude tests, and the big ones we were looking at were the interest inventories, like the strong interest inventory and that sort of thing. And so for my term paper, I thought, I'm going to see if I can do something a little bit different than what, just writing any old essay. And so I asked permission to create my own interest inventory, the mathematics interest inventory. And so I went out and I had a questionnaire that I gave to everybody in the math department at the university, and also to a whole equal number of people who weren't in mathematics at all and hated math, and then seeing if I could compare the differences. Did the math people have a different interest profile than the non-math people? And sure enough, they did. And so I created a mathematics interest inventory to help identify who maybe would be suited going into a math-related field. Like we'd call it STEM now, right? Science, technology, engineering, math.
Yeah. So
that was how I got started in the field. I went out and taught junior high at a small rural school where there was very, very limited resources. And one of the things that they gave the grade 12 students at that school, I taught in the grade 7, 8, 9, but the school went 7 to 12. All of the students in grade 11 got the strong interest inventory, Strong Campbell it was then. And I was appalled that they just handed the results out to these kids. And so I said to the principal, look, I just took this class. Would it be okay if I took an hour with the students and just help them to understand their results? And so
an important step, explaining the results and taking the time to do that.
Absolutely. And so, you could see the lights going on with these kids all over the place. The last thing that professor in my undergrad vocational class said to me was, we almost never get people interested in counseling who also have a mathematics background. If you wanted to start a master's in counseling, we would waive the requirement that you have 2 years of professional experience. And I said, no, I need to go get some experience. So I went and taught for 2 years and then returned to university to do my master's in counseling. I was intending to go back into the school system, but at the end of my first year, I was in the counseling program, was offered a job at a college, a community college. And so I took that job, and that was in Keanu College in Fort McMurray in Northern Alberta. And in a good chunk of my assigned duties was working with the adult basic ed and college preparation programs. So adults were returning to school to get foundational academic preparation to take other programs. And the majority of those folks did not have a clear sense of where they wanted to go, other than they needed some better education. They knew that. And none of the stuff I learned in my programs helped me deal with those career issues for the clients, with the real issues. A 26-year-old mother of of two, who's moved to Fort McMurray with her husband, worked in the oil patch, made a bunch of money, and 8 months later, the marriage is broken and she's on her own with 2 kids and a grade 10 education. None of the cognitive matching strategies dealt with her pain, dealt with her frustration, dealt with her sense of anxiety about the future. And so we had to deal with all those things before we could clear the decks enough to find a meaningful path. And it was through that experience of the processes I had been taught that didn't work that I came up with the 5 processes that we need to focus on. And then after working in the college counseling area for a while, I decided to go back and do a PhD in career development. And so I took a generalist degree because there wasn't such a thing as a PhD in career development. So I took a doctorate in educational psychology, but I did all of my assignments and all of my thesis dissertation work was around career development work. And again, I had no intention of making an academic pathway. I thought I would either go back into college counseling or maybe set up a private practice. And I was doing a workshop in Calgary on some of the principles that I've been working on. One of the people that attended the workshop, his name is Brian Hebert. He became an academic mentor and a very, very good close friend of mine. He came up after the workshop and said, "We've got a counseling position coming open. Why don't you apply for it?" And I said, "Well, I've not even done my PhD. I'm kind of a long ways away from that." He said, "Well, we could use somebody in the career area." So I thought, well, it'd be good practice. So I applied and they were silly enough to offer me the job. So I took a position as a assistant professor at the University of Calgary in the counseling area and focusing on teaching in the career development. And since then, I spent 10 years there, then 11 years at University of Lethbridge, where I was hired to start a counseling program there. I worked with Dr. Kerry Burness, and we created Alberta's then 3rd counseling program. I'm proud to say that in the 2nd year of applications, we got more applicants than the University of Calgary, who had a much longer program, got. We created a distance-based version, the first in North America, that did a combination of in-person and online, well before COVID made online learning kind of the norm. And then in each of those places, I found myself in leadership roles, again, accidentally, not intentionally, and position, actually there's 2 leadership roles were up at the University of Lethbridge. I was offered both of them. And I was also offered the position of Dean of Education at Simon Fraser. And so I accepted that position, and I've been here at Simon Fraser since 2009, mostly working on the administration side. So Dean for 2 terms, went away and wrote that book after the end of my 2nd term. And then I was asked to come back when the dean who replaced me chose to go somewhere else and they needed an interim. So technically I'm still interim dean of education. The search has been completed and they've got a new person coming in. But 3 months ago, I was also asked to come in and take over the academic lead in creating the proposal for and then lead the implementation of a new medical school here at Simon Fraser. So that's what I'm currently doing, is the lead academic on what will be the newest medical school in Canada and the most innovative, and that will have all kinds of career development principles snuck into it that they don't recognize as such, but it's going to transform the program. So we don't talk about admission, particularly we talk about creating pathways to practice. So we go into a community and we'll help create a pathway into medical practice that leads back into those communities. And that's how we're going to reach the underserved and underserviced communities in BC with qualified physicians. There's all kinds of little sneaky bits of career development that are going to find their way in.
Such a cool story, and it shows how taking on opportunities when they come your way, perhaps not even having a career plan to start with, is kind of okay, but be open to opportunities with
Yeah.
a sort of an idea in mind.
Yeah, it's like Gillette used to say, be clear about your direction and clueless about your destination. So you know what you care about, and then you see when you act on that, opportunities come your way that you never could have imagined. Never in a million years, when I left teaching in Kelvington, Saskatchewan, back in the late 70s, did I ever think or aspire to be the dean of one of the top faculties of education in Canada. But you end up there.
And then your medical program, I'm very happy and excited by that as well, because I know medical students, they finish their medical degree and then it's time to choose a specialty, and they're not certain with the challenge of CARMS as well, but they're really not certain which programs they want. So
Absolutely.
I look forward to hearing more about the program.
Yeah, so the undergrad component, before they have to choose their residency opt program, is going to be full of opportunities for them to personally engage with and connect with where they ultimately will want to practice. So we got a lot of ways that we're going to do medical school different.
With the guerrilla tactics in place.
Absolutely.
I've got one more question for you, Dr. Kris. That's because Candy Ho started it, so you can blame it on Candy Ho.
Okay.
I think, in her opinion, you're probably the king of mentors. If we were going to give you a label, and you mentioned that you had a mentor at, excuse me, at some point who supported you. So, what, in your opinion, makes a good mentor?
I think you have to have a sense. Let me give you an example from another mentor that was fairly early on. While I was just starting my PhD, I met a fellow by the name of Barry Day, who, if you're in Alberta, you might have known his name. He ultimately started Western Canada's first career training institute. But Barry was a serious mentor. Like he was on fire mentor. And so he hired me to come in and develop the curriculum for this new Career Development Institute. And it's first day that I'm on the job, I go into Barry's office and say, okay, I'm here. And he goes, great, let's go for a walk. He was always doing mobile meetings, right? So we go for a walk and he's walking around, he's kind of showing me the institute and the facilities. And he said, okay, you know what your first job is? And I said, build this curriculum. He goes, nope, think about who's going to replace you. So the first job of a leader is to find the person to replace you, because there's this continuity, there's a flow, and we're like a pebble in a pond, right? You make a splash, there's a few ripples, and the person walks by 3 minutes later and never knows you were there. And if we care about the systems that we're in, we need to find the people who will carry on that work, and not carry on the work. I don't want anybody, I wouldn't want Candy Ho to carry on my work, but to carry on the work of the field in their own unique way. So be ready to hire your replacement right away. And then secondly, to look for talent. And where I see a lot of people in leadership positions falling down is they're talent hoarders, and they're afraid of somebody really talented being next to them because it would show them up, right? And I think the absolute best leaders are clever enough to hire people way smarter than themselves who can do all the work that needs to be done, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So be on the lookout for talent and be prepared to help the other person understand and respect the talent you see in them. So I talk about harnessing passion as one of the five, they have the 5 Ps. The purpose is harnessing passion. So how do you take somebody who you're talking with, help them to recognize what you see as being a real gift that they might have? They might undervalue it or not even recognize it. And then show how they could harness that gift in the service of something bigger than them. So as one example of that process, when we designed back at Lethbridge, when we first created the Master of Counseling program there, and you have admission processes, and admission to a Master's in Counseling is very difficult. At SFU, we'll get 350 applications for 12 spaces, and those are qualified applicants, right? So it really gets random who gets in. Well, while I was at Lethbridge, because my job was to design the program, then Carrie and I got to design how admissions would work. And so we had a 3-person admission panel. We'd narrow down the applicant field to maybe, if we're going to take in 16 students, we'd have 32 that we would interview. Each person on the admission panel had 1 veto and 1 wild card. And the wild card was, you just sense something in this person. You might not even be able to put your finger on it. And they might not have the best GPA. They might not have had the exact profile of experience that you'd normally look for, but you just somehow knew. Your intuition was setting off. And so we allowed each person on the interview panel to have 1 of those wild cards. And in the 10 years or so we ran that program, not one of the wild cards that got admission ever had difficulty getting through the program. It's really quite amazing. So that was an example of, you look for talent and then you find ways to nurture and harness that. But the nurturing and harnessing has to be in line with their direction, not yours. Right? So that's what I think makes a good mentor, is care about something broader than you. Find people who have some talent and potential to contribute to that, help them to see it, and then help them to perhaps learn from things that you've done that would help them create their pathway, so that their own pathway to poise, so that they can be the stars and they can shine.
Such important qualities, particularly in the career development field, that we're trying to lift up to. Yes. And share how important it is. These were all the questions I have prepared for you, Dr. Kris. Was there anything else you'd like to add, talk about, or wrap up with?
Well, I think you sense I could blither to fill whatever space is available. So we could carry this interview on for the next 3 weeks and still only just scratch the surface of all the cool things that we could talk about in career development. So I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. I've enjoyed the chance to meet you, and enjoyed the chance to talk about these important ideas in career development with you.
Thank you so much. I did as well. And I'm thinking now of starting Dr. Kris series and do these 3 weeks interviews. I really enjoyed it. I learned so much about the career development field through your experience. So I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. My guest today on Hoda's Career Info is Dr. Kris Magnusson. You can connect with Dr. Kris on LinkedIn. I hope the tips he shared help you increase your passion in the work you do. I look forward to your feedback in the comments section. Don't forget to share your feedback in the comments section. Please remember that you can listen to Hoda's Career Info, since it's also dropped as a podcast. To let me know if you are interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. I am your host, Hoda, and until next time, stay inspired and keep moving forward in constructive ways.